I'm joined now by Nawaf Al-Thani, former Director of Defence Intelligence Operations in Qatar and former Defence Attaché to the US. Welcome to you. Thanks very much for being with us. We understand that you don't work for or represent the Qatari government now, but if you can just explain to us, having done both formally, can you explain what the relationship is between Qatar intelligence, the US, Israel, how they might be working together now, specifically when it comes to securing the release of some 240 hostages held by Hamas, although they deny that, as we've just heard, but taken by Hamas on October the 7th?
Well, Samantha, usually, and I'm assuming that this is no different case in Qatar right now, that the foreign ministry leads all negotiation efforts. There are specialized teams, negotiators, that Qatar has built in the past 2 decades of doing this. And they would be leading the negotiation with counterparts in Israel, and obviously with the Hamas presence on the ground, whether through the office in Qatar or in Gaza.
How does the fact that Hamas political leadership is hosted by Qatar help or hinder, do you think, in these possible negotiations?
I believe that having a clear line of communications is vital for results. This is not theoretic. We've actually seen that happening. We've seen negotiations succeed and hostages being released, Israelis and Americans in the past. So this is a proven methodology. And I think the Qataris have to be given every chance to succeed. From what I'm observing, they are very optimistic while being cautiously optimistic. The Israelis need to show more seriousness in their efforts towards releasing the hostages by cooperating with the negotiators in this process.
What are you seeing that makes you optimistic? Because we've spoken to many relatives of hostages here on the BBC who say that they've heard nothing. They don't have any communication from Israel. And we've spoken to Israeli government representatives again say that they have heard very little. So what makes you optimistic?
Well, 2 things. First of all, the track record of the Qatari negotiators. Even as recently as during this conflict, we've seen release of Ukrainian children and returned from Russia to Ukraine while the Gaza conflict was going, plus the successes that I've mentioned in Gaza before. That's the first reason for, I would believe, cautious optimism, but optimism nonetheless. The other is the Qataris haven't given up on this. They've stated, the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister has stated, and the negotiating teams have stated many times that they are committed to this process. But it is cautious optimism, because the second part of this is a seriousness from the Israelis to move forward. Unfortunately, that optimism, while it is within me today, is diminishing day by day with every refusal for the Israelis for a ceasefire and moving forward.
What do you make of the comments we just heard from a Hamas spokesperson who was talking in Lebanon, saying that actually the hostages are not in the hands of Hamas and that they do want to give them back?
Well, I cannot comment on something I'm not well read into, but what I can say is hostages and the Palestinian civilians are paramount for the Qatari negotiators. We've seen that actually have an effect. We've seen hostages being released, so we can't doubt something that we've already seen being effective. We've also seen nationals that, foreign nationals living in Gaza being, through the negotiated process, being able to leave within the hundreds that are still in Gaza. Unfortunately, the borders and the restrictions by the Israelis on humanitarian aid and also people leaving Gaza has hindered a lot of that. But it all hinges on Israel's seriousness for a ceasefire. So the negotiation and other efforts towards stopping the killing of civilians, which is extremely hurtful and unfortunate, that's the only thing that will that hinges on it, and it returns to what the Israelis would do.
When you were defence attaché to the US, what was your view? What is your view now on the influence that the US brings to bear on Israel when it comes to any pause in its action or the ceasefire that you talk of, whatever they feel they have to do to bring those hostages home?
Well, my view today is, what I only can speak of is my view today as it has developed through the years. And today, as a researcher, as a lecturer, and as an observer, I gave a lecture yesterday at Georgetown University. And speaking to the students there, we mentioned that the idea of negotiation is ingrained in the Qatari constitution and its heritage and its history, which is something quite rare in many countries where a constitutional article does call for negotiation and peaceful resolution and de-escalation. So I think that is the driving force behind everything that Qatar has been doing, least of which the issue of hostage negotiation and then resolve of the conflict and in peaceful resolution.
OK, Nawaf Al Thani, thank you very much for joining us from Washington.
Thank you, Samantha.